Hello and welcome back. Today, you might be surprised to learn that some of the most valuable coins in existence could be hiding in your spare change jar or penny collection right now. I'm talking about three extraordinary Lincoln cents from the modern era: the 1970 S small date, the 1989 double die, and the elusive 1997 double-ear variety. These aren't ancient Roman artifacts or gold doubloons from sunken treasure ships. These are pennies minted during many of our lifetimes that can be worth thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars. So before you cash in that jar of pennies at the bank, you might want to stick around. Your retirement fund could be sitting in that roll of cents gathering dust in your drawer. Let's begin with what many experts consider the king of modern Lincoln cents, the 1970 S small date penny. This isn't just any 1970 penny. This is a fascinating example of how even the smallest variations can create numismatic gold. The story of the 1970 S small date penny begins at the San Francisco Mint during a particularly interesting period in American coinage. The late 1960s and early 1970s marked a transitional era for U.S. coins. Silver was being removed from dimes and quarters, the mint was experimenting with different compositions, and production demands were extraordinarily high. Amid this chaos, something unusual happened with the date punches for the 1970 Lincoln cent. The San Francisco Mint used two distinctly different date sizes on their 1970 pennies. The standard size, now known as the large date, was used for most of the production run. But for reasons that remain somewhat mysterious to this day, a smaller date punch was also employed for a portion of the mintage. The difference might seem subtle to the untrained eye, but to collectors, it's as obvious as night and day. What makes this variety particularly significant is its relative scarcity. While millions of 1970 S pennies were struck, the small date variant represents only a fraction of the total production. More importantly, very few were preserved in pristine condition. Most entered circulation and were subjected to the wear and tear of everyday use. Remember, in 1970, nobody was paying particular attention to the size of the date on their pennies. These coins weren't recognized as significant varieties until much later. So how do you identify this elusive penny? The most obvious distinguishing feature is, of course, the date size. On the small date variety, the numbers in 1970 appear noticeably smaller and more delicate than their large date counterparts. The 7 provides the clearest tell. On the small date, the vertical stroke of the 7 is shorter and doesn't extend as far below the horizontal line. The 9 also appears more compact, with a smaller loop. Beyond the date itself, look for the all-important S mint mark below the date, indicating San Francisco origin. Without that S, you're looking at a Philadelphia or Denver issue, which, while potentially interesting, won't have the same value proposition as the San Francisco small date. But here's where things get really interesting for the 1970 S small date penny. Its value skyrockets in uncirculated condition, particularly in the highest grades. A circulated example might bring $30 to $75, depending on condition. But an MS-65, mint state 65, specimen can command $2,000 to $3,000. And if you're fortunate enough to possess an MS-67 example, you're looking at $15,000 to $20,000 or more. The auction record for this variety was set in 2019 when an extraordinary MS-67 Plus red example sold for a staggering $26,400. Think about that for a moment, a 1-cent coin worth over 26,000 times its face value, minted during many of our lifetimes. The value escalation for red specimens versus red-brown or brown examples is particularly dramatic with this issue. For those who might be newer to collecting, red designates a copper coin that retains at least 95% of its original mint luster and color. Red-brown shows partial fading, while brown specimens have lost most of their original color. With the 1970 S small date, the difference between an MS-65 red and an MS-65 brown can be several $1,000s. What makes this penny particularly fascinating is the combination of its modern vintage and extraordinary value. Unlike many valuable coins that date back centuries, this is a coin from within living memory. Many of you watching might have received a 1970s small date penny in change at some point without realizing its significance. There's also an interesting story about how this variety was discovered and eventually recognized by the numismatic community. For several years after 1970, few collectors paid any attention to the date size on these pennies. It wasn't until the mid-1970s that the variety began to gain recognition among serious Lincoln cent specialists. Even then, many examples had already been lost to circulation or copper melting, particularly during the early 1980s when copper prices spiked. Another fascinating aspect of the 1970s small date cent is its connection to proof coins. The San Francisco Mint also produced proof Lincoln cents in 1970, and interestingly, all 1970s proof cents feature the small date. This creates an unusual situation where the small date is rare in business strikes but standard in proofs. However, don't be fooled into thinking that a proof 1970s has the same value as a business strike small date. They're entirely different collectibles with different market values. For those of you checking your collections right now, here's another tip: pay attention to condition. Mint state examples will show no evidence of wear on the high points of the design. Lincoln's cheek, beard, and hair should show full luster and no friction wear. Even slight circulation can dramatically impact value, so examine potential specimens under good lighting with magnification. The 1970s small date penny also teaches us an important lesson about modern coinage errors and varieties. Sometimes the most valuable pieces aren't the result of dramatic mistakes but rather subtle variations that went largely unnoticed at the time of minting. While double dies and off-center strikes might be more visually dramatic, the market has determined that this subtle date size variety deserves premium status. For those lucky enough to find one, proper storage is crucial. These coins should be housed in inert, non-PVC holders or slabs to prevent environmental damage. Even a pristine example can be ruined by improper storage conditions, so if you think you found one, treating it with appropriate care from the outset is essential. It's worth noting that the 1970s small date cent is frequently counterfeited today, given its high value in top grades. Authentication by a reputable third-party grading service like PCGS or NGC is strongly recommended before making any significant purchase. Sophisticated counterfeiters have been known to alter the mint mark on Philadelphia issues or modify the date appearance, so professional verification provides important protection. What I find particularly fascinating about this coin is how it represents the endpoint of an era. The 1970 Lincoln cent was among the last to be struck in the traditional 95% copper composition that had defined the denomination for decades. Just a few years later, in 1982, the mint would switch to the copper-plated zinc composition we're familiar with today. This makes the 1970s small date not just a valuable variety but an important transitional piece in American numismatic history. Now let's move on to our second remarkable penny, the 1989 double-die Lincoln cent. While it might not command quite the premium of our first coin, this is a fascinating modern error that tells us so much about how coins are made and why certain mistakes become treasured collectibles. The 1989 double-die penny emerged during what many would consider the golden age of double-die discoveries. The 1980s saw several significant double-die varieties come to light, with the 1983 and 1984 double-ear Lincoln cents gaining particular attention. But the 1989 double-die stands out as perhaps the most significant of the decade, a classic example of what happens when the hubbing process goes awry. For those who might be wondering what exactly a double die is, let me explain. It's not a coin that was struck twice, as the name might suggest. Instead, it occurs during the creation of the die that strikes the coins. When making a die, the mint uses a hub, essentially a positive image of the coin design, to impress the negative image onto a steel die. This process, called hubbing, sometimes requires multiple impressions. If there's even slight misalignment between hubbings, the resulting die will show doubling on some or all design elements. Every coin struck from that doubled die will show identical doubling. What makes the 1989 double die penny special is both the prominence of its doubling and the timing of its discovery. The doubling is most visible in the lettering of Liberty and In God We Trust on the obverse. Look carefully at the word Liberty behind Lincoln's portrait, and you'll see clear separation, almost a shadow effect, particularly on the letters L, I, and B. The words In God We Trust show similar doubling, with the I and N of iron displaying the most dramatic separation. The 1989 double die was discovered relatively quickly after entering circulation, which helped preserve many examples in higher grades. By late 1989, word had spread in the numismatic community, and collectors began searching bank rolls and pocket change for these valuable pennies. This awareness helped save many specimens from the wear and tear of extended circulation. Unlike some rarer varieties that might have only come from a single die, the 1989 double die appears to have been produced by several different dies, though all showing similar doubling characteristics. This means that while it's scarce, it's not as vanishingly rare as some other varieties. Experts estimate that somewhere between 250,000 and 500,000 examples may have been minted, a tiny fraction of the total 1989 cent production but enough that dedicated collectors have a reasonable chance of finding one. When it comes to market value, the 1989 double die offers an interesting case study in how condition affects price. In circulated grades, you might find examples for $150 to $400, depending on where. But in uncirculated condition, values climb steadily. An MS-65 red specimen might bring $1,200 to $1,800, while premium MS-67 examples have sold for $5,000 or more. The current auction record stands at approximately $6,900 for a perfect MS-68 red example, still a magnificent return on a 1-cent investment. What makes this double die particularly appealing to collectors is that it's a relatively recent issue that can still be found in the wild with persistent searching. I know several collectors who have discovered 1989 double dies in bank rolls as recently as last year. Each discovery story reinvigorates interest in the variety and reminds us that not all valuable coins are locked away in museums or high-end collections. There's also an interesting story about how this variety initially came to public attention. The first major publicity came from a coin columnist who received reports from several readers who had found the variety. Unlike today, when news of a new variety might spread instantly across social media and online forums, information in 1989 traveled more slowly through print publications and word of mouth. This created a window of opportunity for knowledgeable collectors to search through bank rolls before the general public became widely aware. Another fascinating aspect of the 1989 double die cent is what it tells us about mint production processes. The late 1980s represented a transitional period in die preparation at the U.S. Mint. The single-squeeze hubbing process that would eventually eliminate most double dies was still being perfected. The 1989 double die serves as a testament to the older manufacturing methods and the varieties they sometimes produced. It's worth noting that there are varying degrees of doubling on 1989 cents, with some showing more dramatic separation than others. The most valuable examples display strong doubling visible to the naked eye, while more subtle varieties command lower premiums. This creates an interesting spectrum of collectability within a single variety. For those of you searching through your collections, pay particular attention to Philadelphia minted 1989 cents, as the double die variety doesn't appear on Denver minted coins from that year. There's no mint mark on the Philadelphia issues, so look for 1989 cents without a D below the date. And remember to check under good lighting with at least 5x magnification. Some of the doubling can be subtle if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. There's also an interesting misconception about the 1989 double die that's worth addressing. Some references incorrectly describe it as showing doubling on the date, but the primary doubling is actually on the lettering, particularly Liberty and In God We Trust. The date may show slight doubling on some examples, but it's not the diagnostic feature that defines this variety. I find it particularly fascinating how the 1989 double die appeared during a period when most people assumed major mint errors had become things of the past. The modernization of the mint throughout the 20th century had indeed reduced many types of errors, but the double die process remained vulnerable to these misalignments. It serves as a reminder that even in an age of advancing technology, human oversight and mechanical processes can still create valuable anomalies. For collectors, the 1989 double die represents an accessible entry point into serious error collecting. It's scarce enough to be valuable but not so rare that finding one feels impossible. Many collectors develop their interest in mint errors after discovering this particular variety, making it something of a gateway coin into a specialized area of the hobby. The market for these coins has remained remarkably stable over the decades, neither skyrocketing to unobtainable levels nor falling out of favor. This stability speaks to its genuine scarcity and enduring collector appeal. Unlike some varieties that see brief speculative bubbles before fading into obscurity, the 1989 double die has maintained consistent demand since its discovery. There's also a broader historical context that makes this coin interesting. The late 1980s represented the end of an era for dramatic double dies. With the introduction of the single squeeze hubbing process in the 1990s, the classic form of double die would become increasingly rare in modern coinage. The 1989 double die thus stands as one of the last major double die varieties of the traditional type, a final chapter in a fascinating aspect of minting history. For investors and collectors alike, the 1989 double die continues to offer an appealing combination of rarity, visual interest, and historical significance. Whether you're building a specialized collection of Lincoln cent varieties or simply appreciate the allure of valuable modern coins, this double die deserves a place on your watch list. Our third featured rarity brings us to the more recent past, the 1997 Lincoln cent double ear variety. This fascinating modern error has a unique discovery story and represents how even coins from the last few decades can hold significant premium value when they display the right characteristics. The 1997 double-ear Lincoln cent gets its name from a distinctive doubling that appears on Lincoln's ear on the obverse of the coin. Unlike our previous double die which affected lettering, this variety shows its doubling directly on Lincoln's portrait. Specifically, it appears as though the 16th president has grown a second ear lobe or has an ear with a distinctive elongated appearance. The origin of this variety is particularly interesting. It's not a traditional double die created during the hubbing process, but rather what numismatists call a double die clash. Die clashes occur when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other directly without a planchet, blank coin, between them. This typically happens when the feeding mechanism fails to deliver a blank at the precise moment the dies come together. The resulting impact can transfer design elements between the dies. In the case of the 1997 double-ear cent, it appears that a die clash combined with some die damage created the distinctive extra ear effect. What makes this particularly fascinating is that the doubling doesn't appear on other portions of Lincoln's profile, it's isolated primarily to the ear area, creating a very distinctive and easily identifiable variety once you know what to look for. The 1997 double-ear penny was first discovered in the late 1990s by a collector examining rolls of Lincoln cents. Unlike some varieties that were identified by mint officials or recognized immediately upon release, this one was found by an ordinary collector doing what many of us enjoy, searching through seemingly ordinary coins for extraordinary finds. The discovery reinforces one of the most appealing aspects of numismatics, the possibility that unrecognized treasures might still be hiding in everyday pocket change. Identifying the 1997 double-ear cent requires close examination of Lincoln's ear. On standard Lincoln cents, the ear shows a normal, anatomically correct appearance with a single lobe. On the double-ear variety, there appears to be an additional lobe or extension of the ear that creates a distinctive elongated or doubled appearance. This doubling is visible under normal magnification and, once seen, is quite unmistakable. The effect is sometimes described as giving Lincoln a Vulcan ear or elfin appearance. In terms of rarity, the 1997 double-ear cent is considerably scarcer than many other modern varieties. While exact population numbers are difficult to establish, numismatic experts estimate that perhaps 20,000 to 30,000 examples may exist, making it significantly rarer than our 1989 double die. The challenge is that many remain unattributed in collections or circulation because owners simply haven't noticed the distinctive ear characteristic. The market value of the 1997 double-ear cent shows the typical condition-based spread we expect from modern varieties, but with a higher premium than most Lincoln cent errors from this era. In circulated condition, examples typically sell for $100 to $250, depending on where. Uncirculated specimens command substantially more, with MS-65 red examples bringing $500 to $800, and premium MS-67 specimens selling for $1,500 or more. The auction record stands at approximately $3,000 for a perfect MS-68 red example, still a remarkable return on a coin with a face value of just 1 cent. What makes the 1997 double-ear cent particularly intriguing to specialists is how it demonstrates the evolving nature of mint errors in the modern era. As the mint's manufacturing processes became more sophisticated through the late 20th century, traditional double dies became less common, but other types of errors and varieties, like die clashes and die breaks, continued to create collectible oddities. The 1997 double-ear represents this new generation of collectible mint varieties. There's also a fascinating story about how this variety gained recognition in the numismatic community. After its initial discovery, several prominent Lincoln cent specialists began hunting for additional examples. As more specimens came to light, the variety was cataloged and eventually recognized by major attribution services. CONECA, Combined Organizations of Numismatic Error Collectors of America, played a significant role in documenting and publicizing this variety, helping to establish its legitimacy in the collector market. For those checking their collections, it's worth noting that the 1997 double-ear cent can be found in both Philadelphia, no mintmark, and Denver, D-mintmark, issues, although the Philadelphia examples seem to be more commonly reported. Pay particular attention to the ear region when examining 1997 cents, and use good lighting and at least 5x magnification to identify the doubling correctly. Another interesting aspect of the 1997 double-ear cent is what it tells us about the Lincoln cent series as a whole. The Lincoln cent has been produced since 1909, making it America's longest-running coin design. Throughout its more than 110-year history, it has produced dozens of significant varieties and errors, from the famous 1955 double die to the 1922 no D and on to modern varieties like our featured coin. This rich history of varieties has made the Lincoln cent perhaps the most meticulously studied and collected series in American numismatics. The 1997 double-ear also illustrates an important point about modern coin collecting. You don't need to spend thousands on rare 19th century issues to own significant numismatic treasures. Modern varieties like this one remain accessible to collectors of modest means and continue to be discovered in circulation, making the hunt part of the enjoyment of the hobby. Some collectors have noted variations in the degree of doubling on different examples of the 1997 double-ear cent. This suggests that the clash marks or die damage may have evolved over the life of the die, with earlier strikes potentially showing more prominent doubling than later ones. This progressive nature creates an interesting subcategory of collecting, where specialists might seek examples from different stages of the die's life. In terms of investment potential, the 1997 double-ear cent represents an intriguing opportunity. It's recent enough that many examples remain unattributed in collections and circulation, yet it's been established long enough in the numismatic community to have a stable market value. As awareness of this variety continues to grow, particularly among casual collectors who might check their change more carefully after learning about it, we could see values appreciate as the finite supply meets increasing demand. As we approach the conclusion of our exploration of valuable modern Lincoln cents, it's worth reflecting on what makes these three varieties, the 1970s small date, the 1989 double die, and the 1997 double-ear, particularly special in the context of modern American coinage. Each represents a different type of variety or error, each has its own unique discovery story, and each continues to captivate collectors decades after entering circulation. What connects these three pennies is how they challenge our perception of value. Most people would walk past a penny on the sidewalk without a second thought, yet any of these three varieties, which look at first glance like ordinary cents, could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars to the right collector. They remind us that value isn't always about obvious precious materials like gold or silver, but sometimes about the subtle characteristics that make something rare and desirable within its specific context. Thank you for joining me on this journey through some of America's most valuable modern small change. Remember, the next time someone tells you pennies aren't worth anything anymore, you can smile knowing that some of them are worth far more than anyone might imagine. Until next time, happy collecting, and don't forget to check those coin jars.